When it comes to the Royals, what is something that you are thankful for? I'll tell you what mine is next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I am your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, I am based here in Kansas City, though as you found out throughout this week, I am currently in Texas for Thanksgiving. We're doing this episode on Thanksgiving, but had some time in between the lunch portion and the dinner portion, separating with two different sides of the family. So wanted to get this episode recorded, and then it will probably be coming out in the evening time. But on a typical day-to-day basis, Monday through Friday, we'll be in Kansas City, and we'll be giving you 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, where new customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Well, as I mentioned, today will be our last episode where I'm bouncing around, where I'm doing the show. Yesterday was outside. I've got the awkward angle with the computer. I've been trying to find different guest rooms, spare rooms to do a show in, trying to find the time in this crazy holiday week, but wanted to make sure that we gave you some Royals content, even though it is a holiday week for everybody out there. And don't worry, it's not that I'm missing any time with family here. I had a little bit of time stored away in the afternoon to do it, but Friday and Sunday will be our next two episodes coming up this week. We'll be back in our usual podcasting room. Mailbag Friday, of course, will be tomorrow. That should be an evening time episode. Then Sunday will be sometime, I think, in the morning or afternoon. That's the plan for now. But I thought it'd be pretty fitting for Thanksgiving to go over some things we are thankful for when it comes to the Kansas City Royals. And I don't think I need to go too far back. I'm just going to circle what Friday was. As I had brought up on that Friday evening episode, our second shortened episode that we've really ever done, to my knowledge, reacting to the Jonathan India trade involving Brady Singer and Joey Weimer as well. It was something that piqued your interest on November 25th or 26th, whatever it was, and we're still months away from the regular season. And it got me thinking about the days of old, and they're really not that far removed from us, if you will. There were many off seasons, whether the Royals were good or bad, mostly bad, where you didn't hear them make a single move until maybe late December, maybe January, and it was never a big name player. And I think what we've seen in this time with J.J. Picollo being the general manager and president of baseball operations is a different era. You've heard me say that numerous times since taking over on this podcast, because once I started doing Locked On Royals, you started to see a change. It felt like we started in June of 2023. The team wasn't good, but it's when the Bobby Witt Jr. upswing had started. Cole Reagans was starting to make an impact for that rotation. And then, of course, this past season was incredible. And it all began with these aggressive moves that J.J. Picollo was willing to make, was willing to put his job on the line for lack of a better term or lack of a better reasoning. And even though Dayton Moore deserves praise, deserves his flowers, because he won a World Series, he assembled the team, he drafted and developed well enough with a handful of those guys to bring back-to-back American League pennants and a World Series championship to a small market town. But I think Dayton Moore's philosophy and his theme of being a president of baseball operations and a GM was betting on his guys, right? I am going to draft and develop a winning ball club, because it's what happened back in 14 and 15, right? You had the Hosmers, the Moustakas, the Salvador Perez. You even had guys like Johnny Giavitello he believed in. Will Myers was somebody he believed in. Mike Montgomery was. Jake Odorizzi. You had those guys that were homegrown talent, and he viewed them as all being in Kansas City and all being on a winning team. And I think that could work back then. Nowadays, as a small market team, you got to be able to keep up with some of the bigger dogs out there. Believe me, I definitely scoffed when Blake Snell signed with the Dodgers because it's like the Monstars in Space Jam. They just continue to add talent that way. And the Royals are not going to compete like that, but they're competitive now in their own way, where I think they go into every single offseason having this aggressive approach of we're going to go out and fill the holes that we have nearly immediately, if you will. I think Jonathan India was somebody they really wanted, and there was no need to wait till December to get that deal done. When they talk about this middle of the order bat, I'm going to be surprised if a deal isn't done, until after maybe a week after the winter meetings. I would imagine the Royals are going to be jumping on that as soon as the market is right for them. But they are the ones that seem to be setting the market in a couple different ways. Last year, they were one of those teams for the smaller market clubs to set the market. They were the ones to be aggressive. They didn't want to wait back on their heels and say, let's see if that guy will take a cheaper contract. And don't get me wrong, right? Dayton Moore in those years where the Royals were dormant and the free agent possibilities in the offseason or in the trade market, the reason they were so quiet most of the time is they just didn't have a lot of money to spend. There was not going to be a large increase to their payroll on a year-to-year basis. And if they were far from contention, and this was pre the draft lottery, which if you wanted to tank and get a couple of number one picks or top 3 picks, you were going to be able to do that. Nowadays, you could lose 120 games like the White Sox and not pick first. You could pick fourth because of the lottery system. So it de-incentivizes tanking, which is what we all wanted in baseball. But J.J. Picollo and John Sherman and Scott Sharp and everybody up there in the front office, Brian Bridges, looking for talent, they understand that the Royals can be a team that is no different than Milwaukee, is no different than St. Louis, and even though St. Louis has struggled last couple of years. But, for the majority of your life, if you're my age, the Cardinals have been good. Tampa Bay is pretty much good all the time, even with the smaller budget that they have. And they're kind of that outlier, that anomaly. They remind me a lot of the Moneyball A's for years under Billy Beane, that you could have a bottom 5 payroll and constantly find talent where nobody's looking. Or, there's some organization that's, undervaluing a guy, they take on that player and they become a good above average starter at the big league level. The Royals aren't really that, even though they've got Tampa Bay Rays influence coming with Mac Quatrero and Paul Hoover. To me, it's this perfect combination of you've got a manager and coaching staff that know what they want, know what team it takes to win baseball games, and a GM and owner that are on the same page and willing to go out there and get the right player, the right piece for this team. And that happened last year with Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha. They needed 2 starters for the rotation. They got it done. It doesn't mean that every aggressive move you make is going to pay off. There are going to be bad moves that J.J. Picollo makes. There already have been bad moves that he's made before. But if you're aggressive in a small market climate, it makes me pretty thankful for it, because you get to be in these rumors. You get to be in these rumblings. And I'm not speaking as this as a podcaster going, well, they give me content to talk about. That goes without saying, right? I'd much rather be talking about a trade that happened in November than waiting till February to figure out if the Royals are going to add anybody, a significant piece, if you will, to this roster. And I think it's the fearlessness. I think it's the go-getter mentality that J.J. Picollo and company have. And that last year, you're coming off a season in which you improved by 30 games. So when they go out there and make a move like they did for Jonathan India, now you got a little bit more trust. You have a little bit more faith, where if they're going after a guy early or they've circled that guy and he's on their radar, I have more faith that guy's going to work out in Kansas City than I did back in 2019, 2020, 2021. It was, man, it's going to be a miracle if this guy is going to turn anything on in Kansas City. If this guy's going to be able to give you 30 starts, if this hitter is going to be able to give you 100 and 110 games, right? That was the feeling for a long time, and mainly, pre and post 2014 and 15. Back then, if the Royals had a bad signing, it didn't really matter. You didn't really pay attention to it because they were winning. It now matters to maintain that consistency because the Royals don't have that number one farm system that the 14 and 15 squad had, building up to those years. You have to be a little bit more aggressive in free agency. You have to be a little bit more aggressive through trade. And that's something that I've been thankful for. And being a Royals fan, I know a lot of people out there enjoy it too. It's fun to be connected to trades for significant players or to be linked to free agents out there that are going to get a chunk of money. It's a new era. And hopefully this new era is one that just believes year in, year out, the Royals are going to be there. The Royals are going to be a team that are constantly trying to improve their roster. They're going to try to build on each and every year, and they're not going to fall back on the excuse of, well, we're just not there yet. Oh, we need to cut payroll a little bit. If we need to add this player, we're getting this player. If we need to add this guy, we're getting this guy. Where in past years, it was, we like that guy a lot, but we need to see if some of the top dogs pass on him first. And if he gets down to us for the right price, then we can make that move. And that's not all on the GM. That comes back on ownership a little bit too. And right now it feels like everybody's on the same page, which is why you see a 30-win improvement in one season. When you got the owner, the GM, and the manager all on the same page, it can make for a really well-oiled unit. And it would be dumb to say that it wasn't a well-oiled unit all season long last year. They went through the adversity, they had the injuries, and they still found a way to get to the postseason and have some success in the postseason. But now we get to see if it's a level of complacency, hey, that was good enough for us, or if it's we're going to build on that, because clearly that's not where we want to end up. We don't want to fall short in the ALDS. We want to get past that and get to the World Series and hoist another flag in Kansas City. And even though other people out there aren't going to believe in you or they're going to doubt you and think that it's not going to happen again, that was catching lightning in a bottle. If you have a GM that's going to be aggressive, you have an owner that's willing to spend, you're going to have a lot of fun in the offseason months leading up to spring training in 2025 and hopefully years and years after that. Okay, let's take our first break of the show. When we come back, so the Royals went out there and got Jonathan India. What do I think is the next move for this team? We'll talk about it next on Locked On Royals. You are tuning to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our one and only sponsor today in FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. For my pick, I'll go for Chiefs and Raiders on Black Friday tomorrow. I'll be doing the post-game show for Sports Radio 810 WHB. Give me an anytime touchdown for DeAndre Hopkins. He's just been red hot since coming over to Kansas City. I imagine he stays hot in this short week game for Kansas City against the Las Vegas Raiders. I think this is a fun topic to go over because it's a question that I'm sure will pop up tomorrow on Mailbag Friday. It's a question I've gotten a lot throughout this week of, well, what's next, right? Is the next move for J.J. Picollo and the Royals going to be for that middle-of-the-order bat? Is it going to be somebody to replace Brady Singer in the rotation? Are we talking about somebody in the bullpen? A lot of different ways the Royals could go at this point in time. And I think we have to take something J.J. Picollo said into account here, that it is only November 20-something. We got a long ways to go till spring training. We'll see how stuff plays out. The winter meetings are approaching us, and that's when everything's going to start ramping up a little bit. And I really do believe that things are going to cool off until the winter meetings. I could be wrong. Again, the Jonathan India trade, when it happened on Friday, the non-tender deadline, I thought when the Royals were acquiring Joey Wiemer, it was because somebody like Cincinnati was going to be non-tendering him. The Royals wanted to pick him up as some outfield depth. You send somebody else in return, or maybe you send some cash in return, and you get a deal done like that. Now that those deadlines are out of the way, and the Royals surprised everybody by actually figuring out a way to get Jonathan India to Kansas City, which I've had some mixed reactions of. They felt like they gave up too much for Jonathan India with Brady Singer. I've heard people say, I can't believe they got Jonathan India and Joey Weimer just for Brady Singer. I've looked at it as I think it's a win for both sides. It was a huge area of need for both teams. The Royals needed a leadoff hitter, and they got one who's got the fifth best walk rate in all of baseball. And the Reds got a starter who was great last year, gave a team 32 starts on a playoff-bound bunch. And, Brady Singer, somebody that if he repeats that again for Cincinnati, they're going to get a lot closer to the postseason than they were in 2024. But now I do think because Brady Singer is gone, the focus is going to shift a little bit into how do we replace that? And you heard us talk about this in the podcast episode yesterday when it came to Chris Bubic and Alec Marsh and Daniel Lynch and Kyle Wright. I think it's a fine group. I think there is some talent. There is some potential with that group. I'm not really confident in moving Daniel Lynch back to the rotation. I'm not really confident in putting Kyle Wright in the rotation when I just need to see if he can stay healthy and look good in spring training. And that's still, a hope and a prayer at this point. Chris Bubic, as I expressed, I think is a good option to start if he can prove that he can stretch it out, right, in the offseason. He can come to spring training and take that job and run with it. I'm fine with him winning a job. If he doesn't, I feel good about what he can do, in the setup role for Kansas City. But right now, I do think the focus can shift a little bit into that number 4 starter in comparison to the number 5 spot in your lineup, right? The middle of the order bat that JJ Picollo was talked about. Mainly because I want to see how the market plays out when it comes to the middle of the order bat. And I don't know if I really want to see the market play out for a number 4 starter. I think there are guys out there that if you approach them and you gave them a 1-year deal, right, a 1-year prove-it deal, I think they would be willing to accept that. I think there are some very interesting names out there. I brought up Nick Pivetta the other day. Michael Lorenzen certainly would be another great option for Kansas City to come back in and be a number 4 starter. I have thought about this idea of a Max Scherzer too. Not that it's an excellent choice, but he's got that local tie, right? He pitched at Mizzou. He's near the end of his career. I'm not sure that he's going to be overly expensive on a 1-year deal. And again, as I brought up in the first segment today, I don't think it's a matter of being scared away by money anymore for the Royals. I think that they would be willing to give somebody a 1-year deal worth 18 to 20 million and not really bat an eye. Where a couple years ago, you're going, man, that's a pretty significant deal for Kansas City, right? It felt weird when the Royals gave Zach Greinke that 1-year deal. I think that was worth like 10 to 11 million. Might have been 12 now that I think about it. And nowadays, that's a no-brainer for Kansas City. That feels like it'd be an easy 1-year deal. And 1-year deals to me are very doable, even if you're going into the 20 to 25 range, kind of where that qualifying offer sits for a lot of guys. But, that's not something I see Max Scherzer getting. That's not something I see Michael Lorenzen getting. That's not something I see Nick Pivetta getting. And that's where I think the Royals can go into this, winter meetings and see where some things fall, see where the market starts to sway. And maybe they want to go the familiar approach. Maybe they want to go with Michael Lorenzen, give him the job and say, you're going to be our number 4 starter. You're going to be one of those veteran guys that helps us out with the Chris Bubiches of the world, with the Alec Marshes, with Noah Cameron when he gets to Kansas City. And I wouldn't hate it. And I don't think from what a lot of people have said in the comments before, you'd be hating it either. Nick Pivetta's one of those guys that excites me a bit more than what Michael Lorenzen could give you, or what Max Scherzer could give you, or a Shane Bieber out there, because I believe that Nick Pivetta's stuff could be even better than what Brady Singer gave you in 2024. It just comes down to, are you going to be putting too much money into your rotation at that point? It sounds weird to say that, but you got a lot of money in Seth Lugo. You just gave a 3-year extension to Michael Wacha. Cole Reagans eventually is going to get paid. Yes, you would have a cheaper option with the number 5 spot, whether it be Chris Bubic, Alec Marsh, Daniel Lynch, Noah Cameron, or Kyle Wright. But Nick Pivetta declined his qualifying offer from Boston. And that may mean to me that, he's looking for a 2 or a 3-year deal. And he's looking to get somewhere between 15 and 20 million. And if you go that way with Nick Pivetta, then you can't really sign that free agent you wanted to for the middle of the order, right? That's something that would become a little bit alarming to me. So the reason I say you circle the number 4 spot in the rotation going into the winter meetings is I think you could find the right price there. I think you could find somebody willing to take on a cheap 1-year deal, not have to worry about how your rotation sets up, throughout the rest of winter meetings or getting into January. And then all of your focus turns on to that middle of the order bat. And that could be through trade, that could be through free agency. But I feel like this number 4 spot in the rotation, it's got to be through free agency. I'm not sure you're going out there and trading away resources to bring in your number 4 starter. I think there are affordable guys out there that you're not having to hurt yourself financially for, and they would be a good fit in Kansas City. I don't think you'd bat an eye if Michael Lorenzen signed a 1-year deal worth $8 million to come back to Kansas City. I think you'd like that starting 5 in the rotation, and if Michael Lorenzen stays healthy, that's somebody I can count on to give me 25 to 30 starts. I don't know if somebody like Noah Cameron could do that, or Kyle Wright could do that, or even somebody like Alec Marsh could do that in the same way that Brady Singer was able to. So the next move for me, I think it's going to be for the rotation. I think since you just moved Brady Singer, you want to make sure the rotation is solidified before you start worrying about that middle of the order bat, because there's a lot of middle of the order bats out there, whether it be through trade or free agency. You can let the market play out on that a little bit. They also take the opposite approach and say, let's focus on the middle of the order bat. And if we're already going to give a 1-year deal to somebody, that person's going to be available in January or going to be available in February if they're trying to wait it out a little bit longer. But to me, I think you got to turn that focus on the rotation, get that all figured out, get that solidified, and then you can worry about getting that, middle of the order bat. And I still think there's going to be guys out there after the Royals go out there and get their 4th starter for the rotation. Okay, let's take our final break of the show. When we come back, I know the Royals bullpen is going to need to improve in 2025, but this guy is somebody I'm very high on and think is going to make a big impact for this team coming out this next season. That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. And of course, a happy Thanksgiving to all of you out there. I really appreciate you guys watching this on Thanksgiving night, probably, maybe before you go to bed, maybe after the relatives leave, and get you a little bit of Royals news right before we get into the winter meetings, which will be coming up here in a few weeks. I'm still getting, some text and questions from people about Mailbag Friday a little bit ahead of time. Don't hate it at all. That's what we'll be doing tomorrow back in our usual podcasting area. I'm getting up early tomorrow to be driving back. So, everything will be back to normal. No more weird angles, no more bad audio that we're doing. Sometimes you just got to make with what you got here when you're out of town, you're not in the usual area. Just wanted to make sure I was getting episodes out throughout this week of Thanksgiving. But again, hopefully a great Thanksgiving for you all, and we gave you some good Royals episodes in the meantime while you were maybe away from some of your relatives. But the last segment we're going to close it out with here comes down to this Royals bullpen. And I don't see this being a team or a front office that are going to spend a lot of money on improving the bullpen. I think they like a lot of the guys that'll be back. I think they love the idea of Hunter Harvey bouncing back and being a setup type guy for this team. And if he does, it makes the transition for Kris Bubic a little bit easier to swallow because if Kris Bubic doesn't work out, hey, he can always go back to the bullpen. But you could have a better version of Hunter Harvey in the 8th inning and an upgrade in the rotation with Kris Bubic channeling that 2023 version early on in April and maybe combining it with what he was able to do out of the bullpen in 2024. But, you're not going to be able to get everybody improving in that bullpen. Somebody's going to take a step back, and it's just because there's not a lot of all-star type talent in that bullpen. There are good relievers. There are guys that can have good stretches. But to me, there is one reliever in that bullpen that you can count on to give you great stuff for like a week straight. And that's Lucas Erceg. It's not a surprise to anybody out there. He's the best pitcher in that bullpen. He is going to be the closer for this team in 2025. And it's all going to be about bridging that gap to him in the 9th inning. John Schreiber will be helping that out. Hunter Harvey will be helping that out. Sam Long will be back. Angel Serpa will be back. I'm blanking on a few other guys, but Daniel Lynch will be back and able to provide some relief, maybe more so in the middle innings or in long relief. But you're not losing many of the guys that were in your postseason bullpen. And it was a postseason bullpen that I thought looked really good against Baltimore mainly, not so much against the Yankees, though it was a Yankees offense that was nearly impossible to put down for the best bullpen in baseball, which was Cleveland. So for the Royals, I think you can take a little bit of a page out of Cleveland's book. You can take a page out of Detroit's book for sure, because neither of those teams spend on a bullpen. They really don't. Emmanuel Clase is the outlier there. When it came to the Tigers, though, and it came to the Guardians, a lot of those guys had elite level stuff. They developed that guy, and they were great for them for a handful of years, and they moved on from that guy. For the Royals, you do not need to do the same approach you had in 2024, which was we got to replace everybody in the bullpen, and we got to get guys that will throw strikes. That goes without saying now, right? You need guys out there in the mound that can throw strikes, but effective strikes. If you're always living in the zone, you're getting crushed, not really going to matter. Whether you're giving up hits or you're walking people, you're going to frustrate the fan base, and more importantly, you're going to frustrate your team and your manager. But this is where I think the Royals now have more sure things, right? They know what Lucas Ursig is. They know what Sam Long is. They know what John Schreiber is. You can probably expect James McArthur, in my opinion, to bounce back in a lower leverage role. I really think that the stuff is going to play just fine in the bullpen. That's going to be an unpopular take, but that's just where I am at right now. I think that being in the closer's role wasn't for him. I think he can be a sixth inning guy, and that can be a boost to your bullpen. But the one that I've got circled going into spring training, and I know I've done a segment on him before, it's Steven Cruz. Steven Cruz, to me, feels like he's entering a sink or swim type of season. And not that, he's too old to be in AAA. He turned, 25 in June of this past year. But I think, quite frankly, he's too good to be in Omaha. I really do. I think if it was between picking Steven Cruz or Carlos Hernandez, I'm going Steven Cruz. And it wasn't a big sample size for him in 2024. But I go back to these numbers and I say there's something there to work with. And there's a little bit more when it comes to his pitch arsenal that intrigues me, right? So he only faced, looks like, 18 batters in 2024. He only had one of those guys get on base. He retired 17 of the 18 guys he faced. And what we saw in 2023 wasn't terrible, in my opinion. I think there was a big problem in throwing strikes. I think that he just couldn't harness the fastball as well. The fastball could light up the radar gun. But he had this power slider that really could get some ugly swings. But when the fastball's not living in the zone or you're not locating it well, hitters aren't going to swing at that. It doesn't matter what type of bad lineup you're facing. You're not getting anybody to swing at that. So what went a little bit unnoticed from Steven Cruz, because he wasn't up there consistently in Kansas City, he wasn't really pitching in high leverage moments, but he used his cutter a lot. He developed this cutter, started going to it. It took off a few ticks on his velocity, of course, because the cutter's not going to be like a Class A cutter where it's 98 to 102, but it's a firm 95 to 96. And we saw much better control. He didn't walk anybody in the 18 batters that he faced. I think we saw a slight improvement from what he showed in Omaha, which was a lot of strikeouts, a lot of walks. And that's where Evan Sisk falls into the same category for me as Steven Cruz. It's a sink or swim year for them, right? If it's not now, I don't know when you're going to be able to count on those guys. Carlos Hernandez had that chance to do it for Kansas City. He was great for the first half in 2023, really hasn't been that good since. Steven Cruz, I think, has to have that chance. Now, he's got to go out there in spring training and be able to showcase why he's one of the more talented guys with a better arm in the bullpen. But you think about it. If that version, the small sample size we saw in 2024, is what the ceiling could be for Steven Cruz, you add that to your back end of the bullpen, and you got a guy throwing a upper 90s cutter who can locate it pretty well, get the swing and miss, induce the soft contact, and now you pair that with John Schreiber, Lucas Ursig, Hunter Harvey, hopefully a healthy Hunter Harvey, and you can feel great about the final 9 outs in the game because there's just another weapon out there you can count on. Somebody is going to have to make that jump. I think we saw Angel Serpa do that in the postseason. I'd be hoping to see Steven Cruz do that for the Royals in 2025. All right, that's going to do it for a Thanksgiving edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second, find Locked On MLB as baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow, it'll be back to normal and a mailbag Friday. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.